If you love God, subscribe in this video and comment "I love God." It's free. Help us. For 40 years, the people of Israel had waited. 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, driven by the promises of a God they trusted, though they couldn't see the fulfillment. But now, as Moses had passed on, the time had come for the next generation to step forward. The mantle of leadership had fallen upon Joshua, a warrior, not a prophet, not a king, but a soldier of faith. He stood on the precipice of something monumental, leading Israel into the promised land, Canaan. The challenge before him was monumental, yet God's voice echoed in his heart, reassuring him, "Be strong and courageous." The words of the Lord were clear. This land would be theirs, but there was a battle to fight, and Joshua, in his heart, asked himself, "Am I truly ready?" But before the battles began, before the swords were drawn, Joshua had one question: "Are you with us or against us?" And the answer he received was not what he expected. "I am neither for you nor for your enemies, but for the Lord." In that moment, Joshua understood something deeply important. This wasn't his war, it was God's war. The conquest would not be won by human strength or strategy, but by obedience to God's command. The nation's fate rested not on the might of their weapons, but on the strength of their faith. Joshua's heart was still, and the realization dawned. He was not alone, and this was not just his mission. This was God's plan unfolding before them. The first test came swiftly. The people were on the banks of the Jordan River, staring at an obstacle that seemed insurmountable. The river was at flood stage, a barrier that seemed impossible to cross. But God had a plan. He instructed Joshua to have the priests carry the Ark of the Covenant and step into the waters. As they did, the impossible happened. The waters of the Jordan stopped flowing, and Israel walked across on dry ground, just as their ancestors had done at the Red Sea. It was a sign that the same God who had parted the waters before was with them now. With that, they were closer to their promise, and there was no turning back. But the journey was not without its challenges. As they neared the city of Jericho, one of the strongest fortresses in the land, Joshua sent spies to gather information. What they found confirmed what the Lord had already told them. The city was full of fear. The inhabitants had heard of Israel's victories, of the power of their God, and they were trembling in fear. One woman, Rahab, a woman with a past, but a heart full of faith, hid the spies and promised to protect them. She knew that Israel's God had already given them the land, and she asked for mercy in return for her faithfulness. The spies agreed, marking her home with a scarlet cord, a symbol that would save her when the city fell. As Israel moved forward, they crossed the Jordan and arrived at the foot of Jericho. The city stood as an almost insurmountable barrier, but God had already made it clear that victory would not come through the sword. In a surprising turn, God commanded Joshua to have the people consecrate themselves by circumcising all the men of Israel, for this new generation had not yet sealed the covenant with God. It was an act of faith and obedience, and though it made them vulnerable, God assured Joshua that they would not be defeated. For 3 days the warriors rested, while the act of consecration took place, and on the 4th day, God declared that the reproach of Egypt had been rolled away from them. They were no longer slaves but God's holy people, ready for what lay ahead. That night, as Israel prepared for the coming battle, Joshua encountered a mysterious figure. A warrior in shining armor stood before him, and Joshua, sensing something divine, approached him and asked, "Are you for us, or for our enemies?" The answer he received left no doubt. "I am not for either side. I stand for the Lord." In that moment, Joshua realized this battle was not about Israel's strength or skill, but about God's will. The commander of God's army had arrived to lead them. Joshua, in awe, fell to his knees, and in that instant he understood. The victory would come through obedience, not by force. This battle was the Lord's, and he had already given them Jericho. The battle plan was unlike anything Joshua or his soldiers could have imagined. God instructed them to march around the walls of Jericho, silently, once a day for 6 days. On the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times. The priests were to blow trumpets, but there was to be no shouting, no weapons raised, just silence and obedience. Joshua knew this would be a test of faith for his people. How would the enemy react to a silent army marching around their city day after day? Would they ridicule them or see the strength of their faith? As the days passed, the Israelites obeyed without question, trusting in the Lord's command. On the 7th day, the moment of truth came. The city was circled 7 times, and when the trumpets sounded, Joshua commanded the people to shout. In that instant, the walls of Jericho began to shake. With a deafening roar, the walls crumbled and fell, and Israel rushed into the city, claiming victory. God had given them the city, not through weapons or warfare, but through their obedience and trust in his plan. Rahab and her family were saved, just as promised, and they became part of God's people. Jericho was destroyed, its curse declared, and no one dared rebuild it for generations to come. With the fall of Jericho, Israel's victory seemed assured, but the path ahead was still filled with challenges. After the triumph at Jericho, the people moved on to their next target, the small city of Ai. Confident after their first success, Joshua sent a small force to take the city, underestimating the strength of the enemy. But when Israel attacked, they were driven back. 36 men lost their lives, and the army fled in confusion. Joshua, in despair, cried out to the Lord, asking why they had been forsaken. The answer came swiftly. There was sin in the camp. A man named Achan had stolen treasures from Jericho, defying God's command. Only after the sin was purged could Israel move forward. Achan was confronted, confessed, and was punished, and only then did Israel experience victory once more. As Israel continued their conquest of Canaan, God guided them with his strategies. One day, the Gibeonites, fearing Israel's power, tricked Joshua into making a peace treaty with them. The deception was uncovered, but God's mercy still shone through. Later, when 5 kings of Canaan united to attack Gibeon, Israel came to their aid, and God fought for them. The sun itself stood still as Joshua commanded it to, allowing Israel to defeat their enemies completely. The conquest continued, and one by one the kingdoms fell. At the end, Joshua divided the land among the tribes, fulfilling God's promise. He called on the people to remain faithful, warning them that if they turned from God, disaster would follow. After a lifetime of leading Israel, Joshua passed on, but his legacy lived on as Israel's story continued.